Hello and welcome back to the Sky Mobile Transfer Show, where we debate the latest links, rumours and transfers going on in this crazy summer window. To talk all things Arsenal and some other moves around the Premier League, we've got two of the best around. We've got the Athletics transfer guru, David Ornstein, for his second appearance on the Sky Mobile Transfer Show. Welcome back, David.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on board. And the most popular man after his debut that I've ever seen on YouTube at any point, Clive Palmer. Welcome back, Clive.
You're setting me up for a kick in there, aren't you? No, thanks for having me.
No, the fans love you, and understandably so. Right, guys, let's talk first things about Arsenal's result at the weekend. Got the result, 1-0, Calafiori goal after Bayinda slightly flapped that corner. A slightly shaky performance, Clive. Do you think that changes Arsenal's thinking in the final few weeks of the window, or was it just a case of get the 3 points and get out?
I'm focused on the 3 points. I really feel this is a place that we struggle at. We have done historically. I don't know what it is. We can't seem to move around the pitch very well. And a 1-0 win there is almost worth 5 points. You know, it really is. You've got to put that one away and just recognise that every club has a place where they struggle at, where they go to. We've won 3 from the last 6. But before that, I mean, it's a lot. We really struggled there. So now we're starting to feel as though we can cope with these top 6 games. We haven't lost one for quite a while. And this is a great 3 points. Just get in, get out, and let other people talk about how you played.
Absolutely, yeah. It felt like a real great performance from Gabriel in particular. It was nice to see Martin Odegaard looking a lot fresher with his running. I thought in particular if his final pass was slightly lacking, but quite a quiet game for Saka and Gyökeres and Martinelli too. I mean, David, from a transfer perspective, we've seen Eze's move to Spurs feels more and more likely. Rodrygo being linked to Man City, although that feels quite tied into Savio potentially joining Spurs. Does what happened at the weekend or those potential moves change anything in Arsenal's thinking over the final few weeks?
No, I don't think so. Arsenal would have come into the window with a pretty clear plan. They had a new sporting director installed in Andrea Berta around sort of late March time. And if you look at what they've done so far, I think it's highly impressive. They've addressed key areas, the number 9 being the priority. And, you know, there was need for defensive cover, Mosquera, second choice goalkeeper in Kepa. Then into midfield, obviously 2 departures meant 2 arrivals were required, and Zubimendi was already lined up, and I really think that could be one of the signings of the window. And then Christian Norgard, the Brentford captain, Premier League ready international player too. Noni Madueke comes in to provide some sort of quality and depth in the wide areas. But there was always this sort of nagging feeling, I think, at the club and among Arsenal fans about the left-hand side. And it's no disrespect to Gabriel Martinelli, to Leandro Trossard when he plays there, but I think the powers that be at the club feel if the opportunity was right, maybe an upgrade in their mind can be sought from the market. And that's why I think they would have looked at guys like Rodrygo, well documented much earlier this summer. I and others have reported the regard in which Mikel Arteta holds Anthony Gordon, but that doesn't look like one that was ever likely to develop despite the clear and credible admiration. And then other names have kind of sort of come into the frame like an Eberechi Eze, but that was never for the left side. It was always for the sort of 8-10 position, and it was related to the uncertainty over the future of Ethan Nwaneri because his contract had entered its last 12 months and it wasn't clear if he would be signing, so Arsenal had to do due diligence and line up potential alternatives if he was going to be sold, which sounds dramatic now, especially because he's staying and they're delighted with that. And so there were a lot of conversations with his representatives, and we know the background of how he was an Arsenal supporter and was at the club, etc. But when the fantastic development for Arsenal as a club and fan base came that Nwaneri was staying, that becomes less pressing. You can't just stockpile players. You know, there are other players in that part of the pitch already. There's a very, very talented young boy coming through in Max Daumann in the future. And so I think at that moment in time, it takes nothing away from Eze. They love him. They've got really high regard for him. And if the price had been at a level where they could have made something happen in their minds, I don't know, in the 40 millions, maybe you could push it a bit higher, then perhaps that would be a different conversation. But it's never going to be in the 40 millions because he had a release clause that's now expired of 60 plus £8 million. And post-expiry of the release clause, some clubs would want even more for their player. In this case, I think Steve Parish and Crystal Palace would accept you get into that bracket, into that region, and it looks like Tottenham are trying to close out a deal that, I don't know, I'm judging by reports here because I don't know the actual numbers, that may touch £60 million. If it does, that's not a place that Arsenal were comfortable going to when they don't really have the space in their team. So in more recent times, the focus in their heads has been more on the left side, but it would have required a departure. Again, you can't just add players to your squad. And there was some interest from Bayern Munich in Gabriel Martinelli. He was one of many names. Do you remember those days where a different name was linked with them every moment? And I think they were largely credible. And it was in the case of Martinelli, but they took Luis Diaz. And so Martinelli stays at the club. He started at Old Trafford. No movement on Leandro Trossard either, who plays towards that left side. And so I think you're just going to have to see how the rest of the window goes. It's not to say that there can't be some movement there. And clearly Arsenal are attentive to the market. When I've been on NBC at the weekend and I said that the headroom is significant on Premier League PSR rules for Arsenal, they've got a lot of ability to manoeuvre. But the UEFA FFP rules are calculated differently, and Arsenal are quite tight on that. And there was this reaction like, oh, we knew it, there's no money to spend, Arsenal hiding behind the rules. No, it's just the facts. And it doesn't mean that Arsenal aren't able to do something. It's more about you need to balance your squad, and so they would need a bit of outward movement to gain incoming movement. I think they're really happy with what they've got at their disposal on the whole, and let's see if they can get some players out in terms of Reece Nelson, a Zinchenko, a Kivior in the last sort of fortnight of the window. But don't sense any panic there. I think they're calm and they're really determined to go that one step further this season and try and turn their sort of potential and their quality and their competitiveness into silverware.
From a fan's perspective, Clive, do you feel like the situation, if you can't land a Rodrygo or an Eze or someone on the left-hand side, do you think that situation puts more pressure on the Nordri Madueke signing, which I know was a signing that you were actually pretty behind compared to a lot of Arsenal fans, and rightly so? Do you think that adds more pressure to him?
I think it does. I recognise what Arsenal are doing with Ethan, making sure there's pathway for him and Max, and those are the values of our club, right? To make sure our youth players can see a future in the first team. So Arsenal fans looking at left-hand side and saying, can we go that one step further? But David's right, we need to sell to make that happen. And Andrea Berta's come in this year, and I think we've learned about how he buys, how he has multiple targets in the room and eventually lands them. So we've learned about how he buys. Now we need to learn about how he sells. And what's his selling identity? Because our identity as a club for selling is not great. And it's time to reshape that. And I'm sure there are offers in the background, maybe soft offers. But if you want to maintain a level of strength in the selling market so you can reinvest, now's the time to hold your nerve. And don't take those first offers. So I'm imagining, I'm adding up stuff here. I'm imagining this is his chance to show the other side of the ledger. And then if we do get good opportunities and a good offer for certain people, then look at left-hand side. And I totally agree, it's a wide left option, not an interior option, it's an exterior option. And the way we play into wide areas is really critical. So most Arsenal fans are sitting there thinking, okay, we got 6, but we want one more. We want one more, and you can choose your name. And I do think it's important, but I also recognise that January's around the corner. It's only it won't take long and you're there. If you create room in your squad, you can look at it at another point in the season. So I'm hopeful we can do something, but I also recognise, I know my club. They've always left me one player short, right? But hopefully this time we can go that one step further.
Does that as a fan frustrate you? Because I think Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain is still the record sale. And aside from, I can think of Balogun, Iwobi, Nketiah, but aside from that, you haven't really sold that effectively over the last 10 years.
I often wonder why. Sometimes because I think we want to give people an opportunity and we maybe hold the asset too long and we crash it a little bit, and then we go to the market when we're disadvantaged. Other teams don't do that. People sell their captains to make money at the right time to reinvest. We have our way of operating. As I said earlier, I think I want to learn how we operate with this new man in charge and how he views the market, his contacts, his knowledge that he brings in. I want to see how he operates. I'm holding back on it. Of course it frustrates me. When I see, young Liverpool players going off for 25 million. It just seems to happen like that. It doesn't happen for us. You know, we've got players like Fabio Vieira, for example. He's not on big wages. He's young. He's got potential. We don't be able to seem to move him quickly enough. You know, and so why is that? You know? So I'm waiting to see what happens by the end of the window. But absolutely, it is frustrating.
And David, from a sort of talking about potential targets in the past and potential targets in the future, did Arsenal at any stage this summer get close to or show any real interest in signing Rodrygo? And in terms of if space became available in the squad, which you've already outlined so succinctly, would someone like Rafael Leao, who a lot of Arsenal fans are talking about as a dream signing, be a potential option, or is that just too expensive?
Well, I've said this a few times, and I include myself in it. We're not playing Football Manager. And actually, then people pick me up and say, no, if we're playing Football Manager, we'd be better than these executives. So a lot of the stuff that we all hear, and myself from the journalistic world and fans, social media, and even if it's just sort of fantasy in their minds, does not necessarily correlate to the reality. So Rodrygo is a player, there's some logic in it because it appears there's no real space for him at Real Madrid and he might be available for sale. Immediately, clubs who need a left-sided player who are at a high level with ambition start saying, he's the one for us. But that's not just outside noise, because there are people internally at clubs like Arsenal who are really in favour of a player like Rodrygo. They love him. They think he would be an upgrade on their left side. Debate that however you wish. But there's a desire in certain quarters. And not just at Arsenal. You see it at Man City now, who have looked into the situation. I'm sure others would have considered Rodrygo. And you also don't see a lot of the factors behind the scenes as well in terms of why he might not be working at Real Madrid and why he potentially is on the market, what finances are involved in this. It's all very binary. Go and sign him. It doesn't quite work like that, and many intricacies to it all. So Rodrygo, I do think Arsenal looked at and had conversations about internally, but that was quite a long time ago, and I don't think they went any further. Certainly not to my knowledge, and I'm fully respectful of everybody else's journalism and news gathering on that, but it's not one I know Arsenal to be working on. I think there may have been some intermediaries who would have favoured or were aiming to try and bring Arsenal into the equation, like there has been some work done to bring Manchester City into the equation on him if there was to be a Savio departure. The last I heard at the time of recording, it's looking very likely that Rodrygo is going to stay at Real Madrid, and this will all be a load of hot air and wasted energy. So no, I don't think Arsenal made a huge play for Rodrygo. They considered it like they consider many players, and famous last words, but I don't expect him to come into the club. Rafael Leao is a player I love, adore, and I've seen great things for him, of him at AC Milan and Portugal. But I don't know of Arsenal being on that case whatsoever. That's not one that's come across my radar. And so, you know, you touch upon names as you go. So earlier in the summer, for the backup to competition for Saka, they looked at Brian Mbeumo. The fans give me stick for mentioning Anthony Gordon. He was on the list. There'll be a number of players that they would have looked at. But in terms of credible options coming into this last 2 weeks, there's nobody that's sort of, unless it's being done in secret, that's being sort of actively pursued, and there's sort of advanced discussions and there's a clear path. But that's not to say that dominoes can't fall and possibilities and scenarios emerge that aren't necessarily there now. And Arsenal, like all clubs, will be across all of these possibilities and eventualities. The level of analysis and research and due diligence that goes into it now is extensive, but again, easier said than done. So no, I've got to disappoint you on names like Rodrygo and Leao, but that doesn't mean to say that if some interest comes in one of their players, that they don't take decisive action. When you referred to Eze, it's getting to the point now where even if somebody departed at Arsenal, if Tottenham close it quickly enough, then it will be game over on that front. And we'll see, because again, when we record this, there's been no agreement yet between Tottenham and Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace looking for replacements. So there's a lot of moving parts in these things. And that's why, as a reporter in these situations, you often leave yourself a lot of wiggle room rather than being very decisive on it, because these things can change. And unfortunately, on the outside world and often on social media, people don't have much leniency for change. But it's not necessarily us not knowing what's happening, but it's that scenarios aren't there yet. And there have been cases over the years where you know, say Tottenham and Eze, that they've gone far, but until it's agreed, there's possibilities. It's an open chapter, and I think a lot of Arsenal fans would say, "Come on, get back in there, go and do the business. He wants to come." But at this moment, it's not quite as straightforward as that.
Okay, let's touch on some other topics around the Premier League as well. There's plenty that's going on. Marc Guehi, on the subject of Eze, there's that strong links with Liverpool, David. There was that moment at the end of the game where Glasner's trying to catch his attention. It was sort of blown up on social media. He then spoke very positively about him in his post-match interview, and he's been a great servant for Crystal Palace. Do you expect Marc Guehi to join Liverpool at this stage?
That's one that's not clear, yeah, and it's not me sitting on the fence, which I do extraordinarily well. But the situation is that Liverpool made some sort of initial talks with Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace, I think Steve Parish even spoke on the record about it after the Community Shield, that there could be a deal to be done there. He's into the last year of his contract. They really don't want to lose him for nothing. He doesn't intend to sign a new contract, so right now he's going to be going into his last year and leaving as a free agent, which Palace don't want. I imagine they would play him. He's the captain. He's one of their best players, and he's a fantastic player and professional for club and country. But there is this uncertainty. Liverpool will be acutely aware of the situation, and they're masters of the market, really. So they will have their valuation, a level that they're prepared to go to. If Crystal Palace bite on that, then the decision comes down to Marc Guehi. He will factor in game time and his playing opportunities there with Van Dijk and Konate already in position in a World Cup year, whereas at Crystal Palace he'll be playing every week and he's happy there, he enjoys it, and he leads the club by example. At this moment, from what I hear, if the clubs agreed a deal, I think he would veer towards making the move. He probably appreciates what it would mean to Crystal Palace and also to his career, but the conditions have to be right. He's a very clear-thinking guy, Marc Guehi, and if that comes to pass and the conditions are not right at Liverpool in terms of game time or the package or whatever, then he'll stay. No problem. Calm as you like, and see what 2026 brings, where he'll have more options and his pick of clubs. So it's really tough. It could be linked to Eze as well. So if Eze goes to Tottenham or wherever, if he leaves Crystal Palace, does that change Steve Parish's thinking in regard to Marc Guehi? It would be a bitter blow for Palace to lose both of them in the same summer, especially at such a late point. But there is work going on behind the scenes to potentially reinvest whatever money they get in on both that attacking position and in defence. So it's a live situation. There's actually sort of no concrete movement in the last couple of weeks since there were some conversations between Liverpool and Palace. But expect more to take place before the end of the window. It's just whether they lead to a transfer or not. I'd say slightly more that they would, but I don't say that with much certainty, actually. It's really inconclusive.
Okay, one to keep an eye on in the next couple of weeks. One that we know has been completed, Clive, is Jacob Ramsey joining Newcastle. A lot of Aston Villa players going on social media saying basically it's a huge shame that the system kind of, favours Villa selling a young player, an academy graduate like Jacob Ramsey. But from a Newcastle perspective, after a really difficult summer, Jacob Ramsey feels like someone that would really strengthen their midfield options.
It does, and they've got a strong midfield anyway, and so, but I do want to focus on the fact that they feel as though they had to sell this player, and I do think it's a shame. It's such a rare thing when someone comes through to the Champions League level from your academy. That doesn't happen very often. When you have one of those, then you have to look around and look at your balance sheet and say, I need to move him on. And it doesn't feel right to me, and I feel for the Villa fans, and obviously Newcastle will take advantage of that, and And given the fact they have Champions League and they have a very hard-working midfield, we can all name it, but they can't play every game. And they're looking at a 55, 60-game season. And so it makes a lot of sense for them. He fits their profile. Another hard-working player that goes both ways, and it's a goal-scoring threat. Can sit in that midfield three very, very easily, wherever you want to slot him, particularly on the left-hand side. So great for Newcastle, shame for the Villa fans, and I'm glad those players have come out and said something. I think it draws a line to the fact of what we don't know, what goes on behind the scenes. And Jacob Ramsey has accepted it, moved on, and that's the business of football. But I'm so glad there's a little bit of transparency about the emotional feelings that people have about the game.
Yeah, definitely. It did feel quite different, didn't it? And given the fact that Eddie Howe has taken Livramento and Lewis Hall's game on so far, maybe Jacob Ramsey sees his England opportunities improving at St James's Park as well. Let's quickly touch on Nottingham Forest business, David, because Nuno Espirito Santo came out last week and said effectively he didn't really feel ready. I'm paraphrasing, but didn't really feel ready. But in the last few days, they've signed James McAtee, they've signed Omari Hutchinson, they've signed Arnaud Kalimuendo. Feels like they've now got a plethora of options in forward areas, and Forest can go into this season with a lot more confidence now.
Definitely, and this is a club who, in the last couple of years, have confounded the critics. Who, after surviving in their first season back in the Premier League, I think people might have had them down for relegation, despite the heavy recruitment, and people saw the amount of recruitment and players and names coming left, right and centre, and think this is a recipe for disaster, and it clicked. And after Steve Cooper and Nuno Espirito Santo made it work, and clearly the hierarchy there, backed by the ownership that's so visible, have got something good going on. Yep, you come into this season and there was clear frustration, and it seemed timed perfectly that all of these transfers started materialising just as he was having a bit of a rant and the season was starting. Yet irrespective of the transfer activity, which hadn't come to fruition at that point, they still went and won so impressively against Brentford in their opening game. Now they come with reinforcements and they've got European football on the way. And like James McAtee comes through the City School of football and is going to potentially be a magnificent acquisition for them. Kalimuendo, there's a lot of people who will be watching this with intrigue because a lot of other clubs had been considering him, looking at him, potentially moving. I've heard different things. His record's pretty good, but those that have watched him more closely than me have reservations. Wouldn't surprise me if it worked at Forest, given what we've seen with some of these signings in recent times. And Omari Hutchinson, I think eyebrows have been raised about the fee. I don't really like that because I think he's a really good player. I accept you can do your analysis on the metrics and the data and productivity. But I've seen so many of these boys, and you wish them well, who click, and the money comes to be seen as decent value for money further down the line. It's an investment at £37.5 million that needs a return, that's for sure. It's not like, it feels a bargain and he might overachieve now. But let's give a bit of time. They lost Elanga. They needed that wide attacking flair and strength, and he can play inside as well. They've managed to retain Morgan Gibbs-White, however it came about in that remarkable episode. And no doubt with Forest, they're not done until, 7 p.m. on the 1st of September. They looked at Rico Lewis. It seems maybe more likely he'll stay now. But there's real ambition in that operation. And it's maybe a bit unconventional there. And I always think in reporting, always be careful with Forest until almost like the ink is dry, because they've got so many plates that are spinning and they're juggling lots of balls. They've got Edu in there now, who was previously at Arsenal, so it'd be interesting to see how the recruitment develops around him. But it's a pretty fun story, no?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the fact that people were kind of forgetting about Chris Wood and his season last year, and then he pops up at the weekend. Yeah. Plays amazingly well. Dan Ndoye on his Premier League debut as well, gathering a goal. Hudson Odoi still there. It's very, very exciting. To wrap up the show, let's talk about our Sky Mobile switches of the week. This is our favourite completed deal or rumour from the last 7 days. Clive, what would you like to suggest?
I keep forgetting his name. The young player that Liverpool player bought, the centre-back from Parma.
Yeah.
Leoni. Mm-hmm. I thought that's a very interesting signing. And obviously, everyone's rushing to conclusion from game one. So everyone's looked at Liverpool and looking at Konate. Did he have a good game? They need to have some reinforcements back there. They're looking at their midfield. They're open to transitions. But McAllister's not fit, and Gravenberch wasn't there. But one thing they do need is extra cover at the back, and I think he's got a unique physical profile. He's about 6'5".
He's massive. Yeah.
And he's 18, and I saw some clips on him. I thought, that's a smart pickup, that is. You know, they got time to grow him. If they do get Guehi, that allows them time to build the next centre-back for Liverpool. So I was impressed with that move, I'm afraid, from an Arsenal perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a difficult one to recruit for, isn't it? A backup
Yeah.
to Van Dijk and Konate, because it looks like Konate's staying for at least one more season. So I think that's a really smart addition, given his age. David, you work on thousands of deals. What's your favourite rumour or completed one from the last 7 days?
I'm absolutely going to take a rumour as opposed to one that's been done. And it was just before we came on air, actually, and it's that Napoli considering a move for Jamie Vardy in the absence of Romelu Lukaku, who suffered an injury. And look, we'd have to do the digging on the credibility of his chances of going there. I actually think it would be a move that would really appeal to Jamie Vardy, going to Maradona's club and the champions of Italy and a great city full of passion and emotion. It's right up Vardy's street. And listen, like in the absence of a Lukaku, a 38-year-old Vardy, decent value for money. It doesn't mind stepping aside when Lukaku comes back. There'll be loads of options like your Højlunds and strikers that need a move that are a younger age.
Do you think there's a possibility of Højlund going there?
They're one of the many clubs that are interested in Højlund, from what I hear. But you've got your Leipzigs and Milans and plenty others. So I don't know of them holding the edge. And there are so many factors at Manchester United before we even get to the point of Højlund departing. I think he wants to stay there. However, I'm taking it very much as the rumour. The idea of Jamie Vardy rocking up in the Napoli blue is enough to make the mouth water.
Absolutely. Vardy, De Bruyne and McTominay linking up for Napoli. Who'd have thought it? Finally from me, I'm going to suggest a slightly selfish one. Nordri Mukiele joining Sunderland. Cannot actually believe it, to be honest. The fee, I think it was around 12 million euros. I might be slightly wrong on that. It feels very, very affordable. He's had quite a difficult time at PSG in terms of regular minutes there. Hakimi had signed the previous year to play at right back, and then they've signed Luca Hernandez and Pacho to play more centrally, and now Zabani this year as well. So he was loaned out to Leverkusen last year. Didn't actually play that much. I think he had some injury issues as well. But this is a player with so much experience playing in a back three, playing in a back four, playing on the right-hand side at centre-back. And for 12 million euros, another player with so much Champions League experience. Along with Granit Xhaka, it just feels like Sunderland have just made the dream, the moves of my dreams, really. I can't believe it. So Nordri Mukiele, welcome aboard. And we're currently sitting in the top 4 as well. So who'd have thought it? Who'd have thought it? Although a long, long way to go before that's clipped up too endlessly. Guys, thank you so much for watching the Sky Mobile Transfer Show. Remember that with all the transfers going on between clubs this summer, it's never been easier to transfer your network to Sky Mobile. All you need to do is text PAC, that's PAC, to 65075, 65075, and Sky Mobile will do the rest. A massive, massive thank you as ever to Clive Palmer. Thank you very much, Clive.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, David.
Pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of the window if that's possible, and we'll catch you again soon on the Sky Mobile Transfer Show. Bye-bye.